Welcome to the Plant Centered and Thriving podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Kitchens. What's up, Plant Centered listeners? My name is Ashley. I am thrilled you are here today. I feel like I say that every time, but I want you to know that I genuinely mean it. Like, it means so much to Katie and I that you take the time to listen to our podcast and to support our guests that we have on the show as well. So thank you for everything that you do there. Today, I have a special guest with me. Her name is Andrea. I actually consider her part of like my, how do I want to put this? Like virtual vegan community, friendship, support. I don't know, all those things. You know how when you're transitioning to plant-based or vegan, it can feel very lonely. Andrea was one of the first people I would say that I can recall that I connected with way back when. I think she actually reached out to me, and we made that connection of like, oh, well, I don't want to spoil anything, so I'm going to save that for later. But it's just so nice to be able to connect with like-minded people on social media who support your lifestyle. So this is just a reminder for you, if you are feeling lonely on your plant-based or vegan journey, that there are incredible people online who are willing to support you and cheer you on, and people that you can ask questions and bounce ideas off of. So if you don't have that type of community right now, I would recommend going out and searching for one or connecting with people online, especially if you don't have that type of community like in person where you're living right now. So just a little refresher there. So Andrea, she works as the director of business development for a civil and structural engineering firm. She moved to a vegan lifestyle about 9 years ago after reading the China study. And she goes into that a little bit deeper for us as to what brought her to go vegan and why, and some of the changes that she noticed, and how she managed doing it with a husband and with family members. So she gives a lot of great tips there, and I just really appreciate her perspective. So please join me in welcoming Andrea to the show. Welcome to the show, Andrea.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Now, I've known you for quite some time. I actually meant to go back, Andrea, and look on Instagram to see when I started following you, because it's been years. I mean, I don't even, it was way before Instagram was like popular, I
It's
think.
been a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Andrea, I love following Andrea, one, because I mean, you post like you're very vegan friendly, obviously, but then you also post a lot of books that you read. Because I know that you're an avid reader. So not gonna lie, I do get some ideas from Andrea every once in a while, which is nice.
Good. Good.
Yeah.
That's what I like to hear.
Yep. Yeah. And I know, I mean, maybe you can just explain it to the audience. I know that you're obviously big into reading, but I think you're also recently, did you get on the library board or something?
I am. So
Okay.
I am on what's called the Friends of the Dallas Public Library Board.
That's
And
right.
so I think there's about 40 board members, give or take a few. And then we manage a bucket of money that helps fund all the, not all, that helps fund extra things that the Dallas Public Library needs to do. So this year they've actually taken a big giant initiative, and we're actually contributing about $1.2 million. So
Wow.
yeah, so it's a big thing, and
That's, yeah.
just like little things like the little arts and crafts and things like that, it doesn't always get approved, in the budget, but you have to
Mm.
have those things to get the kids in the library. So
Yep, yep, true. Yes,
mhm.
absolutely. Well, if you wouldn't mind just giving us a little background on kind of like who you are, what you do. I already spilled the beans on the library piece and you're an avid reader, but if there's anything else, we would love to hear it.
For my day job, I do business development for an engineering firm, which I always joke because I was an English major and I never in a million years thought I would end up working in an engineering firm, but I absolutely love it. Let's see. So I've been vegan for about 10 years at this point. So things have changed a lot between 10 years
Yeah.
ago and today. I always am super active in something. So I tend to, once I find something, I go deep into it. So right now, during at the very beginning of COVID, we actually started training for triathlons. And so we've done those for the past 3 years. And I've realized I do not enjoy the bike. And
Oh,
so actually on Sunday, I have a race that I'm doing called a swim run. And it's swimming, it's open water swimming and trail running, but it's
ooh.
back and forth. So there's actually 7 runs and 6 swims. So you have a special wetsuit, you carry all
Oh,
your stuff, you swim in your tennis shoes. So I really don't know what I've gotten myself signed up for, but everyone will find out Sunday night.
Right.
So
So you'll go back and forth between the two movements, like flip flop.
yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. So it's about 13 and a half miles of running and 3.1 miles of swimming. And so it's at a
Oh,
park. So you're actually following like a trail system. So yeah,
oh, that
I'm
yeah, it sounds
nervous. I'm
fun.
excited,
Yeah.
so,
The big positive, it sounds like it's there's no bike.
and there's no bike, which
Yeah.
is exactly why I'm like, this is for me.
Yeah. Yep. That's awesome. I know we talk a lot on the show about finding movement that lights you up, that you really enjoy. And it sounds like I'm sure the triathlons are maybe fun at first, but then you realize what you truly enjoy about them, maybe what you don't so
Mhm.
much.
Yeah, and so many people would just say, "Oh, just suck it up, like, you can do it," and I just wasn't comfortable on the bike. I didn't
Yeah.
feel I don't know, I'm not a good bike rider, and so it's like, "Okay, well, I've done 5 of these, and I know I am still not a good bike rider,
Yeah.
let's find something else."
Yep. Yep. That makes sense. Nice.
Mhm,
So, Andrea, I know I've followed you for quite some time. I know a little bit of your story because we have some overlaps in how we were raised. But
mhm,
I'm very
mhm.
curious for you to kind of take us back to what life was like growing up, what food looked like, and then how your vegan journey started to come about.
Yeah, so growing up was very much meat and potatoes, maybe some carrots, lots of meat and potatoes, lots of roast, lots of spaghetti with meatballs, like those types of meals. I was a ridiculously, like embarrassingly looking back at it, I was such a picky eater. But it's because I really wasn't exposed to very many things. I always joke because I never had asparagus until I went vegan. Like, how is
Oh,
that? How is that a thing? Like,
yes.
how is that a thing? So about 10 years, well, so rewind a couple years, I had a friend of mine who she said, you know what? She called me and she said, I think I'm going to go vegetarian for Lent. And so, on the phone, she lives several states away. And I was like, well, oh, okay, you do you. And so then I laugh and say, then the next year she started brainwashing me.
Of
I joke.
course.
And she's
Yeah.
like, Andrew, you should read this book. You should watch this documentary. You should do this. You should do this. So then the next year rolls around and she says, hey, I think I'm going to go vegan for Lent. And again, same conversation. Okay, sounds good. I know you're a good cook. Like,
Yep.
you do you. And so then she really kind of started pushing it, like, Andrea, you drink 2 gallons of milk a week. That's like, when I look back at
Were you
that,
really, Andrea?
yes, I would have a giant glass of milk every night before I went to bed with some cookies, maybe.
Uh-huh. Yep.
I mean, it wasn't like a little 4 ounce, it was a giant
Oh
glass
my
of milk every
gosh.
night. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe there's something to all this. And she said, I really recommend that you read a book called The China Study. And
Mm.
so I buy it. I'm like, oh, this is research. Like, just give me a good murder mystery,
Yep. Oh, yes.
I couldn't put it down. I mean, it was like I was flipping the pages as quickly as I could because I was like, oh my gosh, family history here, family history here. And it's just like, well, is all of this in the family history because it's genetics, or is
Mm.
it because it's the food that we eat? I mean, and I know that that's kind of the argument that's out there. What is
Yeah.
it? But so I said, you know what? I finished this book and I said, I'm going to see if I can give up milk, just milk, for 30 days. And so, like, I kind of finished everything out of my refrigerator, and once that gallon of milk was gone, the 30 days started. And I mean, I would walk past and I would be like, oh, I really want a glass of milk. Or at the
Yeah.
grocery store, it would be like, oh, there's
It's
a
calling to
thousand
you.
gallons of
Yeah.
milk. So during that month, I didn't have any milk. I'm sure there was probably stuff, as we now know as vegans. There's milk in everything.
Yes. Yep.
But no milk from the gallon jug at night or any time during those 30 days. And then I know my personality, and so I don't know why I challenged myself because if I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it.
Yep.
And so 30 days came and went, and then I thought, wow, I'm still alive. Imagine that.
Yes.
And so then I thought, man, everything that my friend had been telling me, I love the animals, I love the earth, I love, all of these things. And so it's like, okay, well, I think we're just gonna go vegan. And so that is my story. So 30 days milk free, and then I've been vegan ever since.
Oh my goodness. I don't think I knew that specifically. That is amazing.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
really, it sounds like your friend really kind of piqued your interest almost, or like was the one kind of like, well, like you said, brainwashed you basically?
Uh-huh, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and she was such a good cook, so she would send me recipes, like, "It doesn't have to be hard, you can just do XYZ," and this is coming from somebody who was, I made tons of stuff in the crock pot with your potatoes and carrots, and so I'm
Yep.
like, there's so many vegetables and things out there that I don't even know what they are, how do I cook them, what do I do? Um, I really think probably the last probably 4 years or so, I've really upped my cooking game. So I feel
Mm,
like I can open the fridge, toss a few things in, and have a pretty good meal. So
yeah.
it definitely took a little. It was a learning curve for sure.
Yes, absolutely. Especially coming off of, well, because I know that you were raised in like more, it was at a horse farm?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. We had horses.
Okay, that's right. And so it's and like you said, you were raised on the standard American like meat and potatoes type of
Hmm.
diet. And so that transition, and like you said, never having kind of experienced maybe a lot of those foods that you really didn't experience until you were vegan, that's a big shift. But
Hmm.
what kind of struggles did you come against? Because it sounds like, I mean, you were determined. It was like you made that commitment to yourself, you're going to do it no matter what. But after that 30-day period, I mean, then what did the transition look like for you?
Well, so a big thing with my job, I do a lot of client meetings. So a lot of my work revolves around food. So
Mm,
the my dad always says, "Oh, she takes people to lunch," and I'm like, "Well, Dad, it's a little more than that."
sure.
But kind of one of my primary goals was, okay, what can I eat when I'm out to eat with clients, and how do I do it quickly so people don't even notice? Because I
Yeah.
don't want to be that person. Well, do you have this? Can you sub this? Can you do this? All of these things. And so even today, if I go to a place that I don't really see anything on the menu, well, first of all, I look at the menu before I go and then know, okay, how can I quickly, easily, succinctly, change this into a vegan option. Sometimes I'll call ahead and have like a restaurant put a little note on it. I'm like, don't make a big deal about it. It's a
Yeah.
client meeting.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the biggest thing is how do you easily go to those work events or family events and just kind of transition with it being without it being all about you.
That's
So
yeah, that's a great point, and for your meal to not look like, "Oh, ooh, what's she eating?" Like, "What is
yeah.
that?"
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it does happen. I mean, probably 2 months ago, the waiter was so nice and, "Oh, what vegetables do you like? We can do this," and so I was like, "Ooh, this is gonna be fancy." It was 3 asparagus spears and, like, 1 piece of cauliflower or
Oh
something, and I'm like,
my.
"Okay, well, I'm glad this is what my option is." So, I mean,
Sure.
it still happens.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think the biggest thing was just at that, conversion time was continuing to educate myself. Like,
Yeah.
that was the biggest thing, and then how to blend that in to the real world.
Mhm. Yep. And you're right, that education piece, that can just, like, maybe empower you to make decisions or to be more confident and like, "Yeah, this is what I'm doing. This is what feels right to me. There's evidence to support that it can help with this, this, and this." So, a lot of great benefits to it.
And it's nice because I've always been involved in some sort of like athletic something or another. And so, and you've had people say, "Oh, well, I tried it."
Yep.
I immediately got sick. And so, you've had those conversations and they're like, "Oh, well, I did it for a day or I did it for a week." And I'm like, "Well, you probably weren't eating the right." And then you kind of get some street cred when you're like, "Oh, I've been doing this for 10 years." And they're like, "Oh, she's alive and she's active." And,
Uh-huh.
so maybe it does work.
Yes. Yeah. So with that initial 30-day period, did you how long do you think it took you to like stop opening the fridge and kind of
Ugh,
looking for milk?
I feel like on occasion it still does that to me.
Yeah.
Because I think it was just I grew up for so long, and that was like, it's probably like some people's glass of wine at night.
Yeah,
Mine
absolutely.
was a giant glass of milk.
Uh-huh.
So it took a little while, but what's interesting is within about 2 weeks, my skin started just changing and clearing up, and it's interesting because I'm like, wow, I feel like there was always a blemish or a something,
Yeah. Yep.
and then it's like, I mean. I'm gonna say perfect, like, "Ooh, my skin's perfect," but it's like, I don't have any issues with my skin, and I'm like, I'm sure it was something related to the dairy. I
Yeah.
mean, when you just take that one bit out and things
Mhm.
start changing.
Yep.
So,
Yeah. I know, Andrew, I think back to all the milk that I drank as a child and I'm like, no wonder I had all these GI issues. I was constipated for 20 some years. So, oof, yeah. So were you married at the time?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
How did that go?
Well, so it's interesting. I always laugh and say that Will is not really an eater. Like, he's not motivated by food, he's not excited about dinner and things like that. And so I remember at the very beginning of our marriage, like I would make the spaghetti and meatballs or the whatever. And sometimes he would say, well, I'm just not really very hungry. And I remember I finally said, do you not like the food? And he goes, no, I'm just going to have some pretzels or some snacks or some whatever. And I'm like, okay, okay, this is weird. It's not how I grew up.
Sure.
Um, and so then I realized, okay, well, I'm just gonna kind of make these meals, and when he wants to eat them, it works. When things changed at first, I would still buy the meat, I would still cook meals. Probably after about 2 years, I just phased out of that. And for a little while, I would still buy, the brats for to cook out on the grill or whatever, but then that phased out too. And I don't buy it, I don't handle it, I don't cook it. And so I think that that was just kind of, a growth thing, because it's
Yeah.
just like, well, I don't want to touch this. There's so many
Mm-hmm.
better options to cook. Why would I want this dead thing on my counter that I have to do
Yep.
something with now?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so interestingly, during the COVID lockdown, everything, grocery stores were not closed, but you're trying to limit your, going out and things like that. And about 2 weeks at this portion of time, Will said, hey, do you realize that I haven't eaten any meat or cheese for the last 2 weeks? And I said, no. He goes, we don't have any of it in the refrigerator or freezer. And I thought, oh, well, that's one way
Yeah.
to move to
Right.
a vegan diet. So he is pretty picky with what he eats. So his vegan diet is a little more vegan junk food diet, but he will not touch meat. On occasion, he'll do like some cheese and crackers. And I know he's had like a couple like fancy work dinners where he's like, well, I'm gonna get a lobster. And but then, it's it's a lot better than what the options used to be. So
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, so I'm really proud of him, and it's nice because with his role at work, he's a leader, and so when people are like, "Oh, wait, you're not going to get steak," and he's like, "No, I haven't eaten red meat in 3 years or whatever it is at this point."
Yeah.
It it's interesting to hear him talk to his male clients and older gentlemen that he does work with, and they're like, "Oh, like
Oh, I'm
oh."
sure. Yeah.
Mhm.
And especially being in Texas, where I mean, meat is even more part of the culture and a bigger deal. And I'm sure much more prevalent than it is in other areas of the country.
You know what's nice? Dallas has a lot of vegan options. So I will say a lot of it's vegan junk food,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
but it's nice that I mean I can go to 99% of my client meetings. There is a vegan section on the menu or something. It's not labeled vegan, but it is.
Uh-huh.
So even at the fancy steakhouses that a lot of client meetings take place, they have a vegan menu, or they can
Wow.
do yeah.
That's
So that
awesome.
there's a place here where it's not as good as what I would make here, but they're like, oh yeah, we do a bang bang tofu, and then it's like on a bed of broccoli and this and that. I'm like, awesome, perfect,
Yeah,
bring it
great.
on.
Heck
Hmm.
yes. Yeah, that's awesome to hear that they're offering more and more of that, which I feel like
Hmm.
the country as a whole, we're shifting in that direction. Some are
Hmm.
slower than others, but we're getting there.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So how was it because you were raised more like like a farm setting? How was that for your family as you were transitioning as well and kind of breaking the news to them?
Well, that's funny. So it's funny you say it like that because so I had gone vegan probably 3 months before, maybe 4 months before Thanksgiving, and I'm like,
Ooh,
how am I going to have my dad come to visit? Like,
yeah.
what are we gonna do? Like, So I will say, I think that first year, dad, like, we still made a turkey. I was
Yep.
still at that, okay, you know, but it was just lots of questions of, well, is this vegan? Well, what about this? What about margarine? All those like little nuances. Um,
Hmm.
my dad likes to ask me a lot about yeast in bread. And I'm just like,
Oh,
Dad, you're getting a little too like, let's
yeah.
talk about the steak on our plate instead of the whatever is in the yeast that you're
Right.
talking about right now.
Yep.
So for the past several years, I have hosted Thanksgiving. And then if they want to bring a turkey or a meat product, they can. But I do all the sides. Everyone loves all the sides.
Yes.
So I think once I had the Thanksgiving meal, that was great, because I always say Thanksgiving is always all about the sides
Oh,
anyway.
absolutely. Yes.
So, I mean, it's just all you're missing is one extra little portion on your plate and you can put something else on that.
Hmm.
So, yeah, so I think everybody kind of gets it and they understand it. They are not moving in that direction, but they understand that this is the lifestyle that I live and now Will is participating in as well. And so, like my father-in-law buys the Beyond brats or
Oh.
burgers or whatever. So at any time we go over, he's always cooking out on the grill. And
Oh.
he's got it's so much easier today than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I like that you highlighted too. Sometimes it takes family just some time to adjust to your lifestyle, even though you're also adjusting to your own lifestyle. But
Uh-huh.
sometimes it's helpful when family genuinely wants to know and is asking questions, like it sounds like your dad was asking you, to try and educate them as best as you can and let them, again, not push it on them, but let them eat the sides for themselves and figure out what it is they like and don't like.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I will say, yeah, several years ago, I kind of put my foot down because, at first when you're hosting people, you want to, oh, let's get them all the things that they want. And then I'm
Yep.
just like, no, I'm not putting my money into the factory farming, world. So
Yeah.
if they want a glass of milk, I have soy milk, I have oat milk, I have almond milk, I have all the milks they can
Yep.
try. So
Was that a tough transition at all? Kind of like saying like, "Hey, I'm not gonna provide this anymore," or how did that go?
Well, so I feel like my dad said, "Can't you just get a half a gallon and put it in
Mm.
there?" And I said, "I have like 20 gallons of all this shelf stable." So it was kind of a joke, but then I think he realized, "Oh, okay, we're not buying this."
Yeah, yeah, yep.
So,
And I think that highlights too, that took you some time. It's not like you put your foot down immediately. You
mhm,
did it sort of in phases too, where you were still buying things for holiday meals, and then you transitioned out of like, okay, well, people can bring stuff in, and that sounds like it's still the case, but it's just like, I mean, that took you some time as well to
mhm,
adjust.
yeah. We have a grocery store here locally, and you enter and you have to go through the meat section to get
Ah,
to the rest of the grocery store. I actually don't go there anymore because of
hmm,
this situation. Like I was like, okay, well, I didn't know I just have to go, but the smell, like I can't handle the
yeah,
smell. It was almost like somebody set it up because I took a big breath and then like tried to go through as fast as I could. And then somebody's cart came this way, and then
oh
somebody's
my
cart came this
goodness,
like they were blocking me in. And I'm like, okay, well, there's another grocery store that I love even more. I just won't go to this one anymore.
yeah.
So
And sometimes you have to make those tough decisions on your journey of figuring out, well, this grocery store is no longer serving me, or I don't want to get caught in this situation again.
I got
Yeah,
stuck.
yeah, that sounds miserable. Yep. Well, were there any other benefits that you noticed? You mentioned your skin clearing up in the beginning. Was there anything else that, as you were transitioning, you're like, oh, I feel a little bit better here or there?
So I never had any health problems. And I wish that I had gotten blood work done before, but I didn't even think about doing
Yep.
anything like that. So I've always been healthy. And so I didn't notice a change one way or the other. Like I wish I had this, oh, I felt so much better. But I'm like, I feel like I've always been pretty healthy and active and stuff like that. So
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that because for some people, there is a health scare where they're almost forced in a way going plant based, or they feel like this is probably the best thing for me health wise. And there's other people who just kind of fall into it because like a friend mentioned it or they saw something and there wasn't this like massive shift. Because, of course, we hear those stories because they're really popular and sexy and all that kind of stuff. So I appreciate that transparency and like,
Mhm, mhm.
yeah, I made the transition and that's kind of how it was.
Yeah, and it really was kind of future thinking. As I was going through
Mm,
the China study, it was high cholesterol, breast cancer, heart disease, and I'm like, gosh, all of that's in my family history. And
yeah.
and I just kept thinking, if I can just put the milk away, obviously, and
Yeah.
a few other things, then maybe I won't have any of these issues. And I'm
Yeah.
like, if I mean, there's a thousand other things I could eat. Why would I continue consuming these things if I know this is in the family history?
Yeah. So that kind of added fuel to the fire of like thinking ahead of like, I could
Yep,
potentially prevent these things from happening.
exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
Mhm,
Yeah. That's pretty powerful.
mhm.
Well, is there anything kind of as you were transitioning or just in what you do now, is there any piece of advice you would go back and give yourself or give to somebody else who is either transitioning or also plant-based themselves?
Man, it's so easy right now. You just have to flip the switch and, like, change your mindset. I think so many people are concerned about what other people think they're eating, you know? Nobody cares.
Yeah.
We all think everyone's looking at us, and they're not? So, I mean, I don't know how many times I've ordered a meal, and then a week later, I have a lot of clients that follow me also on social media, and then they'll say, "Hey, I didn't even realize you were vegan." And I'm like, "Yeah,
Oh,
the meal that I ordered, there was no animal products in it." And I think that they've had experiences where the person has pulled the waiter aside, asked a million, and then it's a
yep.
beating. But I think now things are so easy. You can just slide under the radar if you want to and kind of change your what you're eating easily.
Mhm. Yep, absolutely. And I like that you mentioned as well that you make it easy on yourself by especially when you're going out to eat, like looking at the menu in advance and kind of just taking a look to see what they have and even calling ahead and having them make a note if needed, which I think is
Mhm,
really helpful for people who are especially people who are transitioning or who feel like they stand out when they're ordering meals at a restaurant.
mhm. Yeah. We just went out to dinner with some friends last weekend to a place we've never been. And it was more of a higher end restaurant, and so she called ahead and made reservations and said the whole table's vegan. And so they actually brought us out a little menu that had little dots next to it that said all of these things can be made vegan. And apparently the head chef is vegan.
Oh my
And so
goodness.
and so it was like fancy stuff like the cauliflower steak and like a lentil dish
Yeah.
and so it just took that quick phone call and they just put little dots and they were like, here you go.
Yep.
So
And sometimes that's all it takes, like explaining it to whether it's a restaurant or even to somebody else for them to maybe go above and beyond to accommodate you and how it is that you want to eat.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so many things, it's easy, but it's just a different way of thinking, because it's
Yep.
like, oh, well, grandma's recipe that I've made for a million years, it has 5 sticks of butter.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's great, but you could use Miyoko's
Yep.
brand of butter. Like, go ahead, make grandma's recipe with your 5 sticks of butter, but it doesn't have to be dairy butter. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, there are so many alternatives these days. It is wild. And really anything can be shipped to you, which is nice as well. So if you
mhm,
live in a place where it's not as accessible, there are ways to go about it if this is a lifestyle that you're really wanting to live.
mhm, mhm. Well, and I think with that, you can think about the fancy stuff, but every grocery store has rice. Every grocery store has beans. Every grocery store has potatoes.
Yep.
So I just whipped up like a little breakfast burrito type of a thing this morning. And I kind of looked at it knowing we were going to have this call. And I'm like, I bet this meal cost me maybe like 50 cents,
Yeah.
you know?
Yep.
So,
Probably. I saw a quote recently. It was like someone saying, I'm grateful for all the ways that we can eat potatoes because there are so many ways and potatoes are so wonderful. Well, Andrea, if people want to maybe stalk you on Instagram and see all the books you read or just follow your vegan journey, where is the best place for them to do that?
the best place is Instagram, and my handle is at the Andrea Pinder.
The Andrea Pender, which we
Hmm.
have included in the show notes below. So you can easily go and check Andrea out and support her, especially with your race and everything coming up and everything that
Yep.
you're doing. Support those as well, because I know that you post those on social media too.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your vegan journey with us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. And for you listening, we'll catch you next time. Until next time, keep thriving.